Hey guys, what's going on? Shah here, and today we are going to do another commentary of a 24 Atal'Dazar. This is on a 24 Tyrannical week with Bursting and Entangling, so second week of the season. Most of my group, DPS-wise, had their 4 set. Healer had old 4 set, and I had new 2 set, while not wearing anything else in terms of like set bonuses from previous seasons. So I wanted to walk through what we did right and wrong this run, and just go kind of over through how we executed this. Wasn't perfect, but we're going to start off by heading into Rezan. Now, Rezan is a very difficult boss for the Brewmaster with his main tank buster, which is the serrated teeth. This does do a lot of damage to Brewmasters because it has this tendency to kind of double dip. Bleed effects are not great on some tanks. We're going to commit actually a fairly weak Celestial Brew early on, along with the health pot and dampen harm just to live through that. Now, going forward, the Augavoker could remove the dispel or remove the bleed from me, but I end up not really utilizing that. The pursuit does come out on me, which is kind of odd. I didn't think it really normally targeted tanks, but I've had it happen every once in a while, so I'm just going to back up and do what I can from afar. So you'll see me here. I'm crackling Jade Lightning. It gets me a little extra damage, but it's not really worth doing. Once the pursuit ends, I'm waiting to move back in because there is a kind of weird not lag, but like sometimes the boss will still pursuit or eat the target if you move back into melee range too quickly. So if you ever are cutting it away, try to stay out of melee room for a second until you see him kind of go back to his normal animations in terms of like applying the bleed and doing the fear. So what we're typically going to try to do is we want to play line of sight on the inside pillars here, but I think we're going to end up actually messing that up. Now our druid didn't have meld for this one. You can actually meld this mechanic and the boss will stop pursuing. Now, unfortunately, it's at a slight angle you can see here, so we are going to get the bones to spawn. It's really not that big of a deal. These mobs aren't scary, and honestly, if you have any classes that do benefit from funnel, it might not be the worst idea to actually pick up a raptor or two, but you want to generally avoid not doing that. Here the bleed comes out. I want to make sure I'm staying in line of sight. Now, luckily, the evoker did remove the bleed on me, and we are just kind of backing up, trying to make sure we don't get feared. And this fight is kind of just this general dance of making sure you're line of sighting the fear and staying alive for the bleed. So because of the healer's position, she's going to actually run along this other kind of river stream thing at the edge of the room. Unfortunately, we are going to pick up 2 more raptors, but again, not the biggest deal. If anything, it makes our overall look a little bit better. And we're going to Crackling Jade Lightning to try to get that guy in. Unfortunately, he's a little bit far for taunts, and I want to make sure that he's not hitting my DH. So I do eventually get the taunt there, and we're just kind of grouping them up. As a Brewmaster on this boss, you kind of want to rotate a cooldown for each. You should be able to have Celestial Brew for each and every serrated teeth, and then you want to rotate things like Fortified Brew, followed by like Dampen Harm. Now, while these cooldowns aren't great, pairing them with Celestial Brew will make Celestial Brew last a little bit longer and rely a little bit less on your healer. This fight, outside of the tank damage, has, well, almost no damage going out, as you can see. I am doing 60k HPS, but our healer only has to do 35, and if you had a tank that was a little bit more sturdy against bleeds, they'd, like a Blood Death Knight, for example, you'd probably have even less healing to do on this fight. Alright, so this route that we are executing is primarily for Tyrannical weeks only. On 4 weeks, we will do a slightly different route to get Lust in a different spot, but I felt like Lust on Rezan was probably the better play here. We were just kind of waiting for our group to get here because some of us were struggling behind. We're going to pull basically 1 sword pack at a time. You could get a little bit more aggressive in this area if you have solid group cooldowns. Darkness is a great one. Any kind of like AoE damage reduction as well, so things like Aura Mastery are great, Disc Barrier. There are a lot of solid healers who provide those types of things, but running with the rest of Druid, we're really going to be relying on the Zephyr and the Darkness. Now here is a somewhat of an odd decision. We ended up going right first, and we're going to go back left shortly. And the reason we're doing this is because if you look at our cooldowns, we don't have Tyrant and we don't have Meta for about 30 seconds. So the idea is that we're going to do this pull as kind of like a recovery pull, and then we'll head back to the other side. The main thing to look out for here is the Stalker. The Stalker does a fair bit of group damage and applies a pretty nasty poison to its primary target, which is typically the tank. And the reason that we're not killing the totem right away is because once you kill the totem, the Honor Guard, while eventually susceptible to taking damage, when you kill it, the totem early, it causes your group to take a lot more damage just throughout the entire time spent in combat. So the reason we didn't kill it right away there is so our healer could kind of just get out some damage and focus on CC. So now at this point, we're going to start kiting, and the reason we're cutting down this way is because we're heading back over to the other side. That's also where I'll be saving things like Exploding Keg for. And yeah, this is a very easy dungeon, even with the changes to Yazma, which you'll see in a second. We do end up struggling with Yazma a little bit, but the rest of the run was pretty good. We are now going to head up to the left side, I guess, if you're facing the dungeon. And we're going to be doubling this. Now, something I regret is I am running Dragonfire Brew in this instance. I wanted to test it out to see, and I was kind of thinking like, ooh, maybe I'll sit in Deeper Stagger since it's a 24. I ended up not really sitting in Deep Stagger all that often. So I don't think I would actually recommend running Dragonfire Brew until high fort keys. But again, it's totally up to you and what your preferred playstyle is. I personally like playing Charred Passions. So this key felt a little different, and I felt like my damage was a little bit lower than it should have been by the end of the run. But, you know, that can come down to a lot of things. You can see me sitting in Zen Med here. It's a good practice to do that at the end of pulls, especially on bursting weeks, because if you have some kind of bleed on you, or in this case a dot, and you're not running Diffuse Magic, it's sometimes worth to sit in Zen Med because it's a 60% DR. Therefore, the healer doesn't have to worry about dispelling you or trying to keep you alive. They can just focus on, you know, dispelling themselves and then healing the DPS. So this pull here, our Warlock pulled a little early. I was kind of hoping that the Stalker would come out of hiding, but the Stalker is actually over there by that ping that I just put down. I was letting my groom know at this point that the Stalker is probably in a weird spot, so everyone should be trying to play near melee, so if it does come in, I'm able to grab quick threat on it. I'm going to start shifting over that way to pull it out, and it's going to be right here. Here comes the Stalker, and then we are going to try to finish off the Witch Doctor first, and then following the Witch Doctor, we should be focusing the Stalker. The only thing that we're really worrying about here now at this point, now that it went down, is making sure we can keep these bulwarks under control. We had a nice roar there from our healer, and then I'm going to be watching the Honor Guard to make sure that this bleed doesn't get too out of control. Now, luckily, we do have an AUG. I could call for a cleanse, but I don't feel like I need it at this point. Being a tyrannical week, these mobs don't feel like they hurt all that much, and I'm a pretty beefy 475 item level, so I'm fairly tanky. And while I don't have the 4-set, the 2-set bonus provides a ton of healing, as you can see down there on the meters, finishing that pull just above our healer at 135k. Now I'm coming down into the stairwell here because I see that we have Meta, and we have Tyrant, and we have Breath of Eons available, meaning that this pack is going to get absolutely obliterated. And this is a nice little opportunity for a double pull. There's a lot of things going on, though. You need to watch out for both of the Stalkers. They do a fair bit of AoE damage and apply a nasty dot to the tank. And then, of course, the Witch Doctors with their Venom Blasts, and more importantly, the unstable Hex. That will polymorph players, and as soon as one player's polymorph, it can go to shit. So you just want to be kind of aggressive and with your damage here. Don't do this pull if you don't have, damage ready. Playing with an Aug Evoker also helps because we have a lot of control, with constant knockups and stuns and knockbacks. As you can see, we put them into this corner. We unfortunately don't really have any CC outside of Leg Sweep to do that, but I didn't feel like using it there, so the pull went down. And I know a lot of groups fancy skipping this pull. I don't really see a point if your route is comfortable enough. Now, this is a 24, a tall on a tyrannical week, so it's not a bad idea to just pull this. While it is kind of just 3-target cleave, it's not too difficult of a pull to handle. The Unstable Hex, did it go off here? No, it didn't. Okay, no, we're fine. But yeah, Witch Doctors just cleave them down. If you don't control their Venom Blast properly, you can end up having some one-shots, but as long as your group is fairly controlled with their kicks, it's a pretty tame pull, I would argue. But again, it's to each their own. If you're going to skip this, there's some stuff you'll want to pull in a different area of the dungeon, but it's definitely feasible. My only problem with skipping this pack is you need a way to both get in and out of the boss room, and that's sometimes difficult if you don't have, obviously group coordination, but if you don't have, invis pots, or you can invis in, but then how do you get out? So unless you're playing with a rogue, it's very difficult to reliably get in here. So going into Vol'Kaal's room, my goal is to get my Mystic Touch on all of the targets. So I'm going to start by Chi Waving the right side, and then I'm going to make sure I'm applying it to that orange totem, And then I'm following the boss here so I can get the kick and apply Mystic Touch to that far back totem that our DH is working on. Now this boss is very annoying because you have to get all 3 totems dead roughly within like the same 5 to 10 second window. And when you're playing with an AUG, no offense to AUGs, but they just don't do damage themselves. They buff other players. So you're basically splitting 2 DPS up among 3 totems. So the way you would do it with an AUG is you would have the tank and healer focus 1 totem. But with how far spread out the room is, the healer kind of has to play center. So it's very difficult to kitty weave on this fight if you're needing to allocate that damage from the healer onto a totem. Now, luckily, the healer is running an execute totem. I also have some pretty powerful trinkets and touch of death, so totems shouldn't be too much of an issue. We're kind of just communicating, making sure they're all going down at a similar time. I'm going to finish off this orange totem, and we are set. So now at this point, it's basically just kill boss before healer goes which having the healer, comfortably kitty weaving, we're pretty good. I'm going to be aiming to get diffuse on the healer so she doesn't have to worry about her own health pool. And if I do need to diffuse a DPS because they're in danger, I will. But both Alok and DH, both purple classes, are very, very tanky. And having QB, our evoker getting some off healing and absorbs, very, very strong composition in terms of like defense. For the most part, we're just inching backwards a little clockwise. Our range are playing center, trying to keep the poop there, and our melee and our healer are following the boss in this kind of casual circle. Every time I see Noxious Stench about to go, I try to stay in melee range so I can kick. If you back up too frequently, you might move yourself out of melee range, so just be ready to move back in to get that kick. Now, of course, in an ideal world, you would have our DH kicking because he'll be gaining Fury, which is a damage increase for him, a very, very minor damage increase, but more often than not, just as long as you can get the kick, that's better than letting someone else do it. So yeah, just simple kind of rotato potato. And yeah, this boss will eventually go down. I don't really know what else to talk about here. This route is very hold W and I love it. For those who don't know, Atal was changed this week. I mean, now it's been about 6 days or so, but they basically made it so the trash count in this dungeon was increased by about 11%, give or take, which is requiring you to get a few more pulls. Or we can kind of figure out that Blizzard was implying that we need to pull the very, very center pack in the middle of the dungeon with the mini boss. It's not a difficult pull because it was nerfed, but you kind of have to get comfortable pulling it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's definitely other pulls you can do, but I think in terms of position in the dungeon, the lethality, is that a word? The lethality of that pull isn't as high as I think a lot of people think. And you're in an area where it's very easy to chain mobs in as those mobs die. So you can always keep momentum going and bringing in funnel for your DPS. So in this point, you're really just watching these Sky Screamers as often as you can. They have about a 15-second cooldown on their Terrifying Screech. So as long as you have 1 melee kick, you're good. If you have any more than that, or any less than that, if you don't have a melee kick, you have to rotate, but not a big deal. Swords can do a lot of damage to players if you're not careful. Luckily, Brewmasters have Ring of Peace, which is pretty strong. I don't think I end up using it for a little bit, but every once in a while when we do end up pulling swords, I drop Ring of Peace so the swords stop midair and they don't end up doing any damage to our party who remain inside of that Ring of Peace. This will go down. We have meta, we have Tyrant, so this pull is a go. So we're going to head right in. The only thing we have to pay attention to is Kisho. She's the mini boss troll lady. She does a cast called Dynamite. That's a pretty scary ability if it gets off. It basically causes the dinosaurs to deal more damage and attack faster and stuff. So you just want to lock them down. I don't know if it actually makes them attack faster, but basically it buffs the dinosaurs she's in combat with. So we're going to just focus her. The deadly aim is like a single target nuke on a player. I mean, it's not that big, not that big of damage, but it's still worth using a small defensive on or paying attention to. And then the blue dinosaur does a frontal charge, and the red dinosaur does like a frontal kind of cleave thing. So it's not too difficult. Just got to pay attention. Or is it the other way around? Or do they both do it? I honestly don't know. Now you're seeing me chain in more swords because we were kind of getting to a point where things were dead. It was a very nice Ursols that went down. I think we end up sitting on darkness here. I can't remember, but these swords don't cause too much of an issue. On fort weeks, you do have to be careful if you're chaining this area, but on a tyrannical week, it's pretty tame. Kisho eventually goes down, and then we'll continue pulling up to Priestess Alunza. There are some more stuff we're going to pull towards the end of the dungeon, but we'll come back to that. It's just kind of the same shit over and over again. Once these swords die, it's definitely worth or safe to pull the Sky Screamer into the next pull. I see that Tyrant is coming up here, and then we have meta in about 30, so we're going to be using meta at the top of the stairs for a really, really, really big pull. But with the Sky Screamer almost dead, I just want to make sure that we're all inside of this room in melee. So if everyone's in melee, the augurs here won't do like their charge thing, or whatchamacallit, fiery enchant. So as long as everyone, or guards, sorry, the guards don't do their little charge. I'm blanking. It's so late for me. It's 3 in the morning. So yeah, this pull will go down pretty easily, and then we'll head to the top of the stairs. Now I have a kind of super natty play here. So fire's at the bottom here. Our lock's going to put down a gate. Right when it disappears, I'm going to take and then roll, and I don't take any damage. At least I don't think I did. I'm getting hit with all these follows. I didn't even notice this while I was... So this key I did end up streaming. So if you're interested in watching me doing this stuff live, feel free to, yeah, check me out. So our DH pulled this other Priestess for me. Our healer was getting mana. Now that she's good, I'm going to be tagging both of these Priestess and chaining them into this pull with the guards. And this, on a fort week, is typically a good lust pull. But I think going forward, you could also lust the center pack downstairs. This pack isn't that scary if you keep the things that are important under control. So first things first is the augur. That's a big kind of focus target here. You also have the Priestess. The Priestess can technically kill themselves. If you are being transfusion casted on, you can simply just walk into the pools on the ground. I honestly did not realize how many people followed me during this run. So, cool. Thanks for all the follows, guys. This poll got a little messy here. Targets got split up. With that, Juggernaut was getting feared. And then I accidentally touch of death, and I rolled the bursting stacks. Now, you know, during the run, we were like all in disagreement about whose fault that wipe was. Not in a bad way, but just like, you know, our Warlock had Dwarf Racial that he could have used to stay alive. And I shouldn't have touch of death to roll the stacks. I should have just waited, but I was kind of getting nervous because the pool looked like it was getting a little hectic. So we're going to get a quick res. Now this boss is really easy. The main thing you need to keep in mind is that the boss kills itself. So as long as you control the add on the fight and make sure you're all inside of your, you know, transfusion sanguine puddle things on the ground, this is pretty much a free boss. Now don't get me wrong, healers have to put in a lot of work whenever she does cast transfusion. But as long as you're healthy throughout, it's a free boss because, again, she basically just kills herself. Every time she casts the transfusion and everyone has the tainted blood debuff, she just dies. So starting this off, we're going to be popping a trinket on this card. We're sending cooldowns as well. Or sorry, guard. I meant Spirit of Gold. And as soon as the ad's kind of low and dying, I pull the boss away near a pool to make sure we're in the right position. Now, we're picking up the transfusion kind of late. You can pick it up a few seconds before the cast even starts. So if there's ever a point where you can actually, if the mob's about to pick up a pool, you can knock the mob back, but if he's actually about to stand in it, you can stand in it first, and you should be able to still get a couple of casts of the transfusion off. So this is a scary one. I think, is it this ad that's scary? Oh, no, I think it's fine. I just hit him with a touch of death there. Sorry, I keep yawning. Maybe I don't know if I'll clip out all my yawning, but we'll see. As you can see, the boss is losing health very quickly on this transfusion cast. I think it's 5% or so, or 4% per tick. As long as all 5 players have it. If you have 4 players who have it, it's neutral. And if only 3 players have it, she's actually going to gain health. Which I think ended up happening in an earlier run. And now, as you can see, we aren't swapping to the ad, and that's because our Warlock was able to banish the ad. So banishing the ad means that we don't have to swap to it and the ad can't move. So in coordinated groups or higher keys, it's pretty good to swap your damage away from the ad onto the boss instead, just so you guys can focus on dodging orbs and picking up tainted blood pools. So once that boss goes down, we're still sitting on 4 minutes. As you can see, we're about 4.5% short, but we're going to make that up pretty quickly. Now what we're going to do here for somewhat of a time save, and I mean maybe not that much of a time save, we're going to use this moment to start RP, and as some of you know who go from basically this boss to Yazma, that waterfall wall takes time to clear. So in order to, not sit there just waiting for the wall to spawn, we're going to do this pull here, which will put us at 101%. Unfortunately, Atal used to be a very exact 100% route dungeon. It was very easy to hit that exact 100, but now you're typically going to find yourself at 101, 102, depending on how you're going to pull the dungeon. It's very difficult to hit the exact 100 without pulling some pretty weird stuff. But now that died, we have about 9 minutes going into Yazma with Lust. So what this is going to come down to is we need to live this boss, or we need to get it low enough for the tank to solo, which, spoiler alert, that ends up happening. But let me talk about what we did right and what we did wrong on this fight. So one of the major changes that we saw just the other day, actually this last reset on Tuesday, is that they made her cast no longer kickable, her Racking Pain cast. So now the tank has even less to do on this fight than, they had. But what it does is it applies a very nasty physical dot. While it can be reflected, it is a physical dot that can't be dispelled. And it just does a lot of single target kind of prio damage to that person who has it on them. So basically, it's just a healer mechanic at this point. You do want DPS to rotate their defensives for anyone who does happen to get it. But outside of that, you just kind of have to hope that the healer keeps you up. And the idea here, the general strategy, is to continuously kite the boss around either clockwise or counterclockwise, around the room. And if your group stays in melee, what ends up happening is the spiders get clumped up in the center of the room because they keep trying to fixate to players. And by, the third or fourth time she's spawning spiders, it's very, very easy to not get hit by them. But unfortunately, the way that we kind of positioned the Soul Rend cast is, I end up having to make very janky movements, and I end up making this weird U-shaped pattern where I'm kind of ping-ponging back to either side of the room, which makes spiders a little hectic. And then when spiders get hectic, the chance of getting hit by one gets higher and higher because not all classes can dodge them as frequently or as easily as others. So Racking Pain is going out on our lock. Luckily, he does have Pact, and he has Resolve, and he has Mortal Coil for a quick heal if needed. Again, this group, incredibly tanky. So again, right here is very tough because the spiders are fixating. They're doing their best to try to drop them together, but look at how low our group just got there. The first time we had Darkness, and the first time we had Zephyr, and the second time we had Darkness, but when you don't have anything, it gets really, really scary. So that dot is now on our Evoker. We're trying to keep him up. He should be able to live just fine here. But as you can see, our range are very, very far away up in that upper left-hand corner of my screen. I'm trying to move aggressively, but as you can see, there's still spiders even underneath the boss, which is not where I want them to be right now. Now, luckily, Fixate's going to go away, and there seems to be a pretty clear space in the corner. So I'm going to ping for my group. They know where to go, and they're going to try to get there as best they can. Now, look, if you look at the spiders, they're kind of creating this weird wall, and that's no bueno. So ads get locked in that corner because of that Ring of Peace. And again, we're just trying to move the boss in a way that's not awkward. But if you notice how the range aren't really following and instead kind of making their own path, it's making it difficult to find a position for both myself as the tank for my melee and for the range to really find a good spot to kind of plant and be able to do damage. So as you can see, they're fixating again. I'm going to ping this corner here because I noticed that that's kind of there's a gap there and the spiders are not fixating at the moment. So they're going to be able to get there quick, stack it up, and then all they have to do is focus on not getting hit by spiders. They're not fixating, so they're just kind of standing in one spot. They just need to move out of that corner, and we should be good after that. But unfortunately, because of the movement of the group, we have spiders coming in not from one direction, but from both directions, basically pretty much the center of the room. And this is not what you want it to look like. The way you want to do this fight is you really want most of your group to be in melee. The tank should be making aggressive movements, and then the group can always drop, you know, behind. Unfortunately, our healer did go down. We tried to get a battle res, but the issue with battle resing on this fight is that, well, there's spiders everywhere, and they tend to have a mind of their own, and then they do also fixate at some point as well. So you kind of just get this weird, like, you try to battle res and you just can't get it off. So we did finally get the battle res, but then, you know, our healer went down, our lock went down. I do keep these ads away. Luckily, with the Chaos Nova was really good there, but the Ring of Peace also helped. Those mobs will eventually die, and that's it. I know that my Evoker will eventually go down, so right now I'm pretty much trying to figure out what cooldowns do I have, and how do I basically solo this fight. So I do see that, you know, QB's ad is still up. It is coming in. I'm able to roll out. I tab target. I touch of death, because if that ad connected, I probably would have died. But because it didn't connect, this should be a dead boss. So I only have to work and whittle down about 10%. Now what's nice about, this should never happen, but what's nice about your DPS and group dying is that the Soul Rend no longer happens. She will never apply it to a tank. So what happens is you'll see her kind of just stand here. As I'm moving her, she'll kind of just like pause and not really know what to do. I think it'll happen 1 or 2 more times. Racking Pain does go on me. I Zen Med the initial hit, and we are just aggressively rotating. But if you look how the spiders are currently positioned, this is what the room should look like the whole fight. But because our group was, you know, kind of making their own path, which isn't a bad thing, it's just a little bit more chaotic, we ended up losing people because the spiders weren't clubbed up like you're seeing now. Look at how tight those spiders are grouped. So as long as I don't roll through them, we should be good. And with 5 million damage to go, I have a trinket coming up in 53 seconds, and then again in a minute. Those 2 trinkets and Touch of Death should be plenty of damage to finish off this boss. Racking Pain comes out. Luckily for me, I do have a nice 6-stack Celestial Brew. And yeah, just going to keep aggressively rotating around the room. This boss, literally, the change that they made to this boss was so dumb because, well, it gave the tank nothing to do. This boss never really hurt the tank. The only thing the tank had to do was kick. And while missing the kick could have been, you know, fairly punishing for a group, now it's just, you get hit by it anyways, and the tank just stands here. Not really doing anything. The Sever does physical damage, and most tanks mitigate that pretty well. And now I just pop Dampen Harm for fun, and yeah, gonna finish off this guy any second here. I get a little low. I got actually a little scared at this point, so I pop a health pot just to be safe. I'm gonna send my dagger trinket and little Touch of Death here to finish it off. And yeah, that's how you solo Atal'Dazar. That's how you solo the last boss of Atal'Dazar. Very fun run. This was a group I've played with QB before in previous seasons, and I've played with Purple and Swark recently, but this is the first time this group's ever really ran together, and it was very, very fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed and hope you learned something from this key. It wasn't a perfect run by all means, but it was a route that ended up working, and yeah. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know them down below, and I will catch you all very soon, probably in another Brewmaster video. Hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.